Now welcome to another lightning response video. This time we're going to do a few questions again, and the first one comes to us from Hokarvian, who asked, "Hey Thor, with talk and complaints of Filoni taking or not taking the president role at Lucasfilm, it got me wondering and interested in others' opinions on this too, but rumors are that Filoni might not get the presidency because of his focus on lore and canon. Given how, in my opinion anyway, most Disney products have been poor, most fans are getting around this by having their own headcanons, which is seeming to be the only way to enjoy Star Wars now. I would like to know your opinion on would it be better if Disney stopped focusing on canon entirely and just have self-contained stories. I recently replayed The Force Unleashed, had a great time with the story, characters, and the fact that it's not Disney canon. I really didn't care. I just enjoyed good stories in this universe. I would be very curious for your take and others. By the way, I just wanted to add I really enjoy your channel and keep up the good work." And first of all, thank you for saying that there at the end. And second of all, I kind of find it funny that Disney potentially doesn't want Filoni to be president because he's the lore and canon guy, when that has been one of the biggest complaints about Disney Star Wars. That they can't seem to keep the lore or the canon straight and consistent, or just don't seem to care about it all that much. So you would think Filoni would be the answer to that problem, even though, yes, most of the people who watch Star Wars, let's be real about it, they're more casual fans, they're just the average viewer, and they don't really get into the canon or lore. Yet at the same time, you would think you would really want to also try to keep your most devout fans, those who do keep up with everything, you would want to keep them happy by keeping things consistent. And let's be real about it, there are tons of channels out there that just focus on Star Wars lore and canon, and people love to watch them. So there is an interest in it, certainly, even by more casual fans who don't necessarily read it all and keep up with it all themselves. And personally, I have always kind of been a lore and canon guy. I do find it all interesting. I like when things are consistent and coherent. I've said before that consistency is king. That you don't really have a story if things aren't consistent. If a series of events don't make sense with each other, then it just is gibberish. It's not a story. You have to have things that align. But that said, as the years have gone by, I have maybe changed a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I still would love Star Wars to be not perfectly consistent, but very consistent. For them to try to make sure things align with each other for the most part. But I've gotten to the point where headcanon is indeed king, where that's all that matters. If you're actually watching something and enjoying something, then don't let the fact that, oh, this little detail here doesn't align with that little detail in that story, don't let that ruin your enjoyment of something. I kind of talked about this in another recent video where someone asked me if the sequel trilogy existing kind of ruins everything because all roads lead to the sequels, or all roads come from the sequels, since we're now, Disney and Lucasfilm are apparently moving past the sequel trilogy and a lot of their future content movies are going to be set after it. They basically asked, does that automatically kind of ruin everything? And I mean, in a way, yes, especially if you do love the lore and the canon and you really, really want to think about it as a sort of alternate reality, that this really did happen a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, even though, yes, you know it didn't. But I mean, if a show or a movie is good, then let it be good and enjoy yourself watching it, and let your headcanon rule. Who cares if it has something remotely to do with the sequel trilogy if it ends up being really enjoyable? And I'm not trying to defend Disney or anything like that. I honestly think it wouldn't be that hard for them to actually keep things very, very consistent, that you do have a story group that is supposed to do that very thing. I personally would love it if it was just, if it was just a good, well-managed and curated canon that makes sense. That would be amazing. That is what I would prefer. But again, I'm kind of just to the point where make something good so I can just sit there and enjoy it. Again, that's not an excuse to not make it consistent with the canon or anything like that, but just make good stuff. Try to use new characters, try to do different things. Don't always try to make everything super interconnected either. You don't have to do that. I like a little bit of it, sure, but you don't have to have everything feel like the MCU, where there's always, this is the story that takes place after this story, and then we're going to bring all these characters back for a culmination. But you don't need to do that here. You can have subtle little connections, but bring in a bunch of new characters, do different things. Expand the lore and canon within reason, don't get crazy with it. And I think they would be okay. I think people would eventually, if you're not connecting everything to the sequels, which potentially they're going to do here. But if you're not connecting everything to the sequels, I think people are going to be more okay with that. But either way, let your headcanon rule. Enjoy what you want to enjoy, ignore what you don't want to enjoy, and let other people enjoy it if they want to. Basically, yes, I do wish it were more consistent, but enjoy the parts you want to enjoy and let the other parts go. Alright, let's now move on to this one from The World According to Hans, who asked, Hey Thor, before I begin, let it be known that I am not a fan of everything in the Disney canon, particularly not the sequels or the Acolyte. However, though I love the Force Unleashed games, the KOTOR games, and the Clone Wars comics, I think the EU is grossly overrated. Most of the books I find boring, such as the Republic Commando novels, as they are so slow and not much happens, at least not the ones I read. Sometimes the EU has downright horrible things, such as Palpatine returning, the Yuuzhan Vong, and Luke, who completed his arc, not sensing the darkness in and submitting to Sabaoth. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. And yeah, there is certainly a lot of questionable stuff in the EU. It is not all great. And to be completely honest with you, I don't even remember probably half of what I've read from the EU. Keeping in mind, I started reading it over 30 years ago now, which kind of blows my mind and makes me feel old. But I started reading it back with Heir to the Empire when it came out, and then I was a devout follower of it for years and years. And then there was a time there in the early 2000s where I was working all the time. I had a girlfriend, I had a lot of things going on, and I wasn't really reading as much, and I missed a lot of books in that particular time period. And I've been meaning to go back and read some of it and reread some of it. In fact, I have been doing that. I just reread the Revenge of the Sith novelization. I've recently reread Plagueis. I've reread Outbound Flight, a few other books. And I've been meaning to do more. Maybe I'll do videos on them. I'm certainly doing a video on the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Anyway, no, it's not all perfect. There is some bad in there, but like I was saying to the previous question, you take the good with the bad sometimes. It's not going to be perfect. And you should certainly complain when things are bad. I know I hear all the time people say, just be grateful you get any Star Wars. And once upon a time, I felt that way back way in the early 90s when I started reading the EU. I certainly wasn't like questioning how good or bad it was. I was just happy to be getting anything. I was grateful to be getting anything. And this was, of course, in the dark times between the OT and the prequel trilogy when Star Wars had kind of faded. So when it started up, I was like, this is awesome. I loved it. Didn't think twice about how good or bad it was. Nowadays, though, I'm older. I understand it is a business. They're trying to make money, and you can't just be grateful. You have to be critical. I use the analogy all the time. If you go into a restaurant and you order food and you pay for the food and they bring you a plate of crap, you aren't going to say, well, I'm just grateful you made me something. You're going to be angry. You're going to want your money back, and you're probably not coming back to that restaurant ever again. But in the case of Star Wars, if more often than not they're serving quality, if more often than not the shows and the movies are good, then the few times you do get served a plate of, well, maybe not crap, but a plate of something that isn't so good, it's more tolerable. You understand they're not going to be perfect. And again, by all means, complain when it's bad. Tell them when it's bad. Tell them when it's not something you want out of Star Wars. That's your right as a paying customer. In other words, you have to be somewhere between grateful just to get it and just way too critical to ever really appreciate anything that they're giving you. Though, yes, when it is really bad, when it is the plate of crap, do feel free to complain quite a bit. Alright, let's move on from all that now and do a question from Catherine Lewin, who asked, Hey Thor, a bit of an Andor what-if question related to Syril and Dedra. If Syril had survived the massacre, what do you think Dedra would have done? I think she was genuinely fond of him and cared for him in her own way, but would this fondness have survived the potential risk he would have been to the Empire? We see her telling her aide to make sure Syril doesn't leave the building after he has confronted her about Gorman. While this could be because she didn't want him to be hurt or killed, he also now knows what the Empire has been doing on Gorman, and this makes him a security risk. If Syril survives, does Dedra, because she cares for him, try and bring him back to the Empire's point of view, or let him go his own way? Or because of the security risk he now is, does she help the Empire to arrest him or even kill him herself? I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Thanks for all your content. Love your videos. And you know, going into Season 2, I was very much rooting for Syril and Dedra, even though, yes, I know Dedra is really not a good person, and Syril isn't necessarily a great person either, though he's more of a gullible, easily led astray type person. He is a follower and not a leader. And even Gilroy said he could have just as easily fallen in with the rebels as he did the Empire and Dedra because he just wants a place to belong, which I think is one of the reasons why so many of us kind of relate to the character, because we all want a place to belong. We've all maybe had a friend that led us astray, or that was just the wrong crowd, if you will. Now, all that said, what does Dedra do if Syril survives, and assuming he's captured or brought to her? I think she tries one more time to convince him to side with her. Because, as you say, I think she does care about him. I think she likes him and maybe in her own way loves him. But there is certainly a fondness, there is a care for him, and I think she would want him back, but I don't think Syril would ever forgive her. I think Syril, yes, he's a follower, but he reached a breaking point. You could see it on his face when he's witnessing the Gorman massacre. So what I think happens is she tries one more time to convince him to rejoin the Empire. Let's go enjoy our promotions. Let's go back to Coruscant as heroes of the Empire, essentially. And he says no, and then she probably throws him in prison. He's probably ending up in Narkina 5 in the long run or something like that. I don't think she kills him. I think she just throws him in prison and forgets about him, and that would have been the end of his story. Alright, and let's do one more question here before wrapping it up, and it comes to us from one Bermser, who asked, "Hey Thor, what do you think of Kathleen Kennedy and the original print of A New Hope article? Do you think she would ever allow an official release of it? If it were me, if I was on my way out the door like she is, and what I'm secretly hoping for, if she were to allow a Blu-ray version with 2 versions of that print, one complete and unrestored, and one complete and restored, I think it would go a long way to try to, lip trembling, forgive her." And for anybody who doesn't know what's being talked about here, there was just a showing of the very first print or very first version of Star Wars, back when it was just called Star Wars, long before A New Hope was even in the title, and Kathleen Kennedy sort of presided over this showing. Anyway, do I think they should somehow release that version, and do I think it would maybe give Kennedy some credit among the fans? Well, yes, but I think there's a problem with that. That being, I don't think she can re-release it. I think this is a George Lucas thing. I don't think he ever wants those original versions re-released or re-released. He has always sort of maintained that Star Wars was not finished back in the day, and that as the years went by with the special editions and other changes made in the DVD and Blu-ray releases and McClunky being added into the very final version of A New Hope that you can see on Disney+, he's always maintained that they will never be finished, because you never, as a creator of these sorts of things, you never truly finish them, you just release them eventually. And thus, I think Lucas, as much as it is a huge piece of history, I think he looks at the original versions and he says those are not complete, so why would anybody, or why would I want anybody to see them? And thus, somewhere in that contract signed between Disney and George Lucas, it says we cannot release those. That's my guess. I could be dead wrong. There could be some reason why Disney themselves doesn't want to release them, though it's dollar signs. People are going to buy them. So I don't think that's the issue. I really do think the issue is George Lucas says no. Though all that said, there are ways to find the original versions. I'm not going to go into them because they're not exactly legal, but they can be found. You can find the original versions. You can rewatch them. You can enjoy them in their original glory. It's really not that hard to find them either. So if you want to go do that, by all means. But again, I'm not going to get into the means by which it is done. Well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell me what you think about anything and everything I talked about here in this video, or ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.